So now that I created my background for the article, I can start thinking about working with the text. This is the text created by Colleen's Writing for Yearbook class that we want to utilize to create a really beautifully graphically designed work. When we go to do this, one thing I may want to think about is this background going to be too distracting for the text? So looking at it, if the text is a dark color, it's going to get completely lost in these stripes and no one's going to be able to read the article, which is kind of the purpose, is that we're trying to enhance the article, not distract from the article. So before I kind of start bringing the text in and working with it, I am going to change my background just a little bit. And one thing that's a really easy fix is if I go into the Shape tool and I grab either the rounded rectangle or the rectangle, I can make a shape on top of my background. So I'm just going to drag it over the background, leaving kind of a border. Now this is a really dark color. I think I want it to be a really light color so that when the text is on top, it's readable. So all I have to do to change the color is I go over to this dark box, I double click on it quickly, and it brings up a color palette, and it's pretty much every color you could imagine. I want it to be a light white color, so I hit OK. And now I have kind of that little tiger pattern peeking out, but I'll have the font on top. I do want it to be centered, and you can see as I move it, these little green lines appear. Those are guides to help me know that it's centered. The other thing I could do is if I'm like, oh, I really like that tiger pattern, I want to see more of it. Again, I've selected that white background. If I go up to opacity, which is how much you can see through something, and I change it to say 80%. Now I can see a little bit of the tiger pattern, but I still am able to read the text. Now I'm going to use my selection tool, the black arrow, and I'm going to copy this and then paste the exact same thing over here so the two articles are similar. And again, I'm going to use those green line guides to move it around until I know that they're lined up. Now we remember that one of the things that's super annoying is when you're working on top of something, you want to lock it in place. So I'm going to use my tool, select both of these, Object, Lock, Selection. So now that I have my background more readable, thinking more as a designer and what the text needs, I can bring my text in for the article and start manipulating it. So I'm going to go File, Place. I could go onto the server to get the article. I made a copy of it in my kitten project folder. Here's Practice Article History of Kittens. It's a docs file, which is a Word document. I hit place. It's asking me, do I want to keep some of the stuff like the footnotes and the table of contents? And I might as well do that, so I'll hit OK. And then it's saying, oh, hey, wait, the font that the article's written in, you don't have that on Illustrator, so we're going to change it to a different font. And that's fine. I don't mind that, so I'm going to hit OK. And now you can see it brings up a text box, which has the whole article in it. And I'll notice it has this little red box down here. That means I'm not seeing the whole article. So I need to pull down and make sure that I'm not missing any information, because my goal is to capture every single part of the article in my graphic design. If I pull the edges of the text box, just like a photograph, it's going to adjust the size. And you can see then the article kind of shimmies up. It gets a little bit shorter. And it's all right now the same size font. I'm going to zoom in so I can see things a little better. So I'm going to hit Command plus on the keyboard. If I want to zoom out, I can hit Command minus. I also can adjust how zoomed in I am in this bottom corner here. You can see the percentages. So it just depends on what your preference is. But I can see there's a title, The History of the Kitten. There's the who it is by, it's by a student, and then there's the actual article. When I go to design, the title is going to be the biggest thing, and usually we make it a little bit showier so it really grabs people's attention. The student's going to be kind of the middle ground for size, and then the actual article will always be 12-point font. We don't want it any bigger because then we're adding pages and we're adding expense to the yearbook, which we don't want to do. So for when I go to bring this stuff into the article, I'm going to want the title and the student to be kind of separate, and then there will be a text box for the actual content of the article. So I'm going to take anytime you're working in text box, you're going to use the T. I'm going to just highlight the title, History of Kitten. And I click off the text box and I come on over here and kind of click in this area so the computer knows I want stuff popping up over here. And I highlighted that. I did Command C to copy it, and now I'm going to paste it. And it makes a separate little text box. Now you can see this text box is a little different. It's stretching out the text. So I can kind of go in here. I can change some things. One thing that's kind of nice about Illustrator is it has, I think, approximately 80 different fonts, 80 to 100 different fonts. So if I want to see what all those fonts look like, I highlighted my text. I clicked in this box, which is the different fonts, and I can push the up-down arrow, and you can see it's shifting the font, so I can kind of look for one that I like. I think that one's kind of nice looking. If you click over here, it gives you options. Maybe I want it to be regular, not bold, so it's not looking really thick. The lines aren't super thick. I also can adjust the size here, so I can go up, make it bigger. I can go down. I can actually put in a number if I know I don't want it any bigger than 18, for example. I also could center it, make it aligned left. It just depends what you prefer. And so I have the title that way. I can do the same thing with the author. So I come back over here, click in my text box. So I need to grab the T anytime I'm working in a text box. Highlight it, Command C, copy it. And now I can click in the article, same thing, by a student. And this I'm going to want a little bit bigger. And normally you want it to be the same font. So this was Telugu MN. So I'm going to find that font. Grab my arrow anytime I'm selecting stuff. And I can go down to that one. There it is. And I'm definitely going to want it bigger. You want it bigger than the article, so I know I want it bigger than 12 point. I think I go up to 14. And then I'll make sure that it's centered underneath, looking for those little green lines to help guide me. So that's an option. You could do it this way. The other thing that's kind of fun that we have an option for when working with the title and the author is going on a website called dafont.com. And we're going to incorporate, basically it's a screenshot, but we're tricking the computer into thinking it's font. So I'll show you how to do this. I'm going to go onto the internet, and I'm going to go to dafont.com. Now this is a website with many, many different types of fonts. You can search them by different categories. This one actually I think looks kind of nice. It's just right on the front page. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this font. And the article, if I go back to my Illustrator file, is The History of the Kitten. So I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to put in that title, The History of the Kitten. I'm going to make it kind of a medium size so I can see what it looks like. I hit submit, and it gives you a preview. And it looks like this font has many different ways it can be laid out, which is kind of cool. I really like this one with the texture right here. Actually reminds me a little bit of maybe stripes on a tail, which is great connection for the article. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command-Shift-4 to take a screenshot. I get my little crosshairs and I'm going to drag around it. I'm trying to not have as much white in the picture as possible, so when I let go, it takes a picture for me. I can minimize this and get out of it. So there's my screenshot, and I'm going to go into my Rachel folder, into my kitten project, drop it in there so that I know where it is. And now if I go back to Illustrator, I can go File, Place, and I'll go into my kitten project, and there it is, The History of the Kitten. I'm going to hit Place, and then there is my title. Now this is actually a photo, but it looks like text. And it also is really interesting text. So it just gives it that kind of pizzazz that we as graphic designers really want to do for the article. Now, I may like that white box around it. Me personally, I want to see the texture of the tiger fur. So I'm going to do something called an image trace to get rid of the white background. So the way I do that, I'm going to go Window. And here are all these different toolbars and things I can do. I'm going to bring up the image trace window. So there it is. I can kind of bring this over here so I can see what I'm doing. It selected this, so I know that I wanted to trace this object. So I wanted to keep it in black and white, but if I go to advanced, I can see there's a ignore white box that I can check. Now if I hit trace, there we go. Now it actually looks like a text. It's a really interesting font, but it's actually a photograph we've traced into the program. And I can do the same thing if I go back to this website by a student with the author. So I'll probably make it a little bit smaller because we know we want that font to be a bit smaller. There we go. So Command Shift 4. Take my screenshot. You can hear the camera go. If I go onto the desktop, I see my screenshot. Again, making sure to drag that into your folder, otherwise things are going to get confusing very quickly. So I go back into Illustrator, File, Place. I'm going to grab my screenshot by a student, Place. And this one, what's kind of nice about working with a photo is I can just adjust the size. I can line it up so it's centered. There's that green line that helps me know. And then I'm going to do the same thing. Ignore white, trace. And comparing the two, it just becomes a personal preference. I personally think that the other one looks a little better, so I'm going to delete these. I have my title, I have my author, and now I'll be able to put the actual text underneath. But since I made a lot of changes, I'm always going to save my progress. File, save. Make sure that it's going in your, History Kit and Project folder. There we go.